Hello, hello, hello. Here. Hello, hello, hello. Can you all hear me? I am trying to make sure you can hear me. Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me today. And today of the 30-day redemption, we are going to be talking about with. Before we get into it, let me introduce myself. I am Jabrita Shelton, the founder of Jabrita Shelton and Company and Trauma Transitions for Everyday Living. A few things that we're going to be talking about today is I want to introduce trauma. Of course, as you know, there are so many things happening in the world today and in our nation. And apparently, panic and anxiety has been heightened. Um, Different forms of anxiety, different forms of things that we are experiencing as a nation that we have never experienced before. And so I want to say thank you to Shahab for allowing me to have this shared platform and to his team for assisting me as well. So let's jump right into it without further ado. So, first thing we're going to be talking about is introducing trauma. We are going to get very clear on what trauma is, okay? Very clear about what trauma is. We're also going to talk about how to recognize areas of trauma exposure and the effects of trauma and the ownership of trauma and how to treat yourself through trauma. We will have a segment in the end for Q&A. So please write down your questions, add them in the chat so you don't forget, and we will get to those questions as soon as we can. So what is trauma? Trauma is damage to the mind that occurs as a result of a deeply distressing event or experience. Trauma is both psychological and it is also emotional. Trauma occurs following a very stressful event, as of today, causing physical injury, physical and emotional shock. Okay, trauma does not care what race, it doesn't care what religion, it doesn't care, your economic or your educational status. It has no respect of persons. As you can see today, trauma affects us all. And it also affects us in different ways. I did have a PowerPoint. However, if you are interested in that, you can leave your email in the chat box and I will make sure to get those slides over to you as well. So before we go a little further about trauma, trauma occurs following very stressful events, as we stated, causing physical injury, also physical and emotional shock. So there's three types of trauma that we're going to talk about. First one is acute trauma. Acute trauma usually stems from one singular incident, okay? One singular incident. It can be an isolated incident. It could be an incident that happened within the family. It can be something that happened on the job, but it's usually one singular incident. The next type of trauma is chronic trauma. Chronic trauma is a series of prolonged and repeated incidents such as domestic violence and abuse. Abuse can come in many forms. You know, abuse used to be identified as physical bruises or badgers. Abuse now is not just physical or emotional. It's also psychological. It is religious. It is emotional. It is physical. It is sexual. It is so many areas of abuse that can be identified under chronic trauma. And the third type of trauma that we're going to talk about today is complex trauma. And this trauma is varied by the extensive combination of invasive and interpersonal traumatic experiences. I'm going to say that one again. Complex trauma is the trauma varied by the experiences, the extensive combination of invasive and interpersonal traumatic experiences. So, that being the case, let's talk about how we can recognize areas of trauma. How do we recognize areas of compromise or areas of trauma exposure? I asked these questions. I'm going to my slide 1 second, please. I usually ask these questions to each of my clients before we ever begin working together. The questions you might ask are these. What has you stuck? What has you afraid, undecisive, or suppressed in one part or certain parts of your life? The next question. What causes you to jump, sweat, blow up in rage, or dismiss continuously? And thirdly, what causes you excessive irritability, anxiety, unhappiness, anger, sad, or keeps you from sleeping at night? I'll take a pause because for many of you, these questions are simply an opportunity for you to self-assess. But if you want to go a little bit deeper than just self-assessing, if the moment you heard something that resonated with you, and you felt it, but yet you rejected it, then these are sure ways you can begin to recognize areas of trauma in your life. My job today is to help you identify what those areas are and to help find practical methods of application that will break the weight associated with the pain of your past. Trauma has an adverse reaction and response depending on where we are while we're in it. I'm going to say that again. Trauma has an adverse reaction and response depending on where we are while we're in it, or what we have been able to identify, own, or treat on the journey to healing. So as we stated today, even if we look today, with everything that's going on with COVID-19, the families that's being affected, those who are, losing loved ones, who are grieving the loss of those loved ones, having that experience having to be quarantined, having to be restricted and confined to, creating a new norm. If you think about those things in terms of what you may be experiencing, being pulled away from your work, loss of income, this is a time you can look at it in two ways, right? But it also will have an adverse reaction and an adverse response, depending on where you are. A lot of us, truth be told, have not taken the time to sit alone with ourselves in terms of having to really deal with and really reflect and really dig deep within ourselves. We have not had this much time to really focus on the thing that really matter, which is ourselves and our family. So trauma has an adverse reaction and response depending on where we are and why we're in it, or what we have been able to identify, own, or treat on the journey to healing. The effects of trauma deepens with the frequency of our exposure to the familiarity of the unresolved pain. Let me go on. Those effects can be intense emotion, emotional instability, unhappiness, anxiety, feelings of isolation and loneliness, anger, resentment, irritability, rejection. And the more exposure, the greater impact on the mind, body, and spirit. Yesterday and day two, yesterday and day two, Shahab talked about visualization and visual. He also spoke about, how all of these things are playing into our psyche. When I was young, I used to hear my uncle say, don't let people live in your head rent free. But how many of you know that that's a strong term, but it's not as easy to reflect upon? So let's go a little bit further. Trauma effects. What does it affect? It affects your mental, emotional, and psychological. It has a mental, emotional, and psychological impact. Who does it affect? It affects individuals, groups of people, or a body of persons, economic and geographical environments. It does not matter. Again, we said in the beginning, it is no respecter of person. It does not matter what race, what religion, what color, what creed, what sexuality, what your sexual preference is. It does not matter. Any of those things do not matter to trauma. Trauma inadvertently affects us all in different ways. Most traumas can be ran back to your childhood. Okay. Most traumas can be ran back into your childhood in many forms. The majority fears we deal with as adults are birthed through the dysfunctional eras of our youth and the distorted parenting of repeating generational cycles. I'm going to say that again. Most traumas can be ran back to childhood in many forms. The majority fears we deal with as adults are birthed through the dysfunctional eras of our youth and the distorted parenting of repeated generational cycles. Many people would never do the work to trace the past to its source of why they behave the way they do, because it is often too painful to do so. I'm going to take a pause here because what I have learned in my experience, personal and professional experience about trauma, is that trauma is not something that most people want to have a conversation about. So the fact that today we're having a conversation about trauma and having the opportunity to sit still and really think about prospectively and respective to the things that we are dealing with currently and the things that we have yet to deal with from our past. We have to give ourselves the opportunity and the time to mentally process where we are currently, but also to visually see where we want to go once all of these things are over. Okay, so now that we have the time to do that, let's take some time to move on. Okay. However, again, those who have the courage to trace, to face, and to deal with the pain of their childhood, pre-existing conditions, are those to whom lives flourish excessively. Why do I say that lives flourish excessively when we have the opportunity to deal with our traumas? When we deal with our traumas, we give an opportunity to the generation preceding us, be it our sons, our daughters, our nieces, our nephews, our grandchildren. We give them an opportunity to advance from a clean slate because we've done the work within ourselves and for ourselves that they no longer have to do. While we are all a work in progress, we must have the courage to confront our past so that the future of our generation no longer has to suffer. The work you choose to do today will benefit the generations in your bloodline to come. So currently and presently, as we're dealing with the COVID-19, nobody knows where we are. Nobody knows what will happen after, which creates a panic, which creates an anxiety. But I encourage you today to sit with yourself and get into a mind space that allows you to do the work necessary so that when you come out of this, you are 5 times or 10 times stronger mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically than you were prior to this happening. As we know or have heard the term fight or flight, these are the natural brain responses to stress or danger. I want you to think about it. As a child, when you sensed danger, you either stood and dealt with it head on, or you ran and you hid. I was one of those people that I stood, I faced it, I dealt with it head on. Very seldomly have anything in my life ever caused me to be in fear or terror. But I can honestly say that this has impacted me in a way, and in my household has affected me in a way, as well as I know it has all of you, that it is only my duty to stay above mentally, spiritually, and emotionally, to stay above all of the news feeds that we hear every day. So while I'm not trying to make this presentation about COVID-19, specifically talking about transitioning trauma, but I thought that because it is very relevant as to what we're dealing with now currently, let's continue to move forward. Think about it. As a child, when you sense danger, you either stood and dealt head on, or you ran and you hid. Now, medical professionals would explain it this way. When we feel threatened, the brain signals the body, releases stress hormones, as in cortisol. Cortisol is a steroid hormone that, when released into the bloodstream, acts to increase your metabolism and glucose. So in other words, your energy increases and your heartbeat revs up. What does that mean? That means that anxiety kicks in, panic kicks in, the brain shuts down. It also means that sometimes you have adverse reactions. Some people may go as far as to vomit or to urinate on themselves when they are afraid. Some people have sweaty palms. Some people get profuse sweating on the head or under their clothes. So many things happen as a result of trauma and the effects of trauma in the brain. Now I'm going to open up the session and we're going to talk a little bit about ownership in trauma. Okay, ownership in trauma, and what does that mean? What to own in trauma and how to treat yourself through trauma. You might ask, why is ownership a part of this conversation? I'm going to help you. Ownership does not release the offender from his or her responsibility of the pain caused. Okay, let's say that again. Ownership does not release the offender from his or her responsibility of the pain caused. However, what it does is it gives you an opportunity to write a new narrative and tell a new story. It also releases and relinquishes the power offense that has taken place against you. In trauma, you must own your true feelings, your complete thoughts, and you must own what you choose to do with your pain. There's a quote by an author unknown that says, "What you resist, persist." I want you to think about that for a moment. What you resist, persist. After you have taken some time to become reacquainted, excuse me for this disruption. After you have taken some time to become reacquainted with your trauma, only to know that, only to now take action, get in the driver's seat and take control, you can now begin to take the necessary steps toward your healing. The best thing to do is take the time you currently have to deal with, face and confront your personal struggles, heal your wounds, nurture your mind, body, and spirit so you can come out better and not bitter. Now, okay, I see a few. Let me see. Okay, wonderful. All right. So I want to get into a little bit about some ways that you can treat yourself through trauma. Now that we have identified what trauma is, we have identified how to recognize areas of trauma or compromise. We have talked about a little bit about owning trauma. I want to talk about uncovering for rescue. Uncovering for rescue. The first thing you must do is that you must get real with yourself. I'm going to say that again. The first thing you must do is you must get real with yourself. Now is the time to go within. Now is the time to go within. It seems as though life has been a little bit more quiet on the streets, a little more quiet at the playgrounds, a little more quiet in the grocery stores. Not many movement, not much happening in the streets, but there's a lot of things that we can do in the home. Healing trauma is not just about you personally. It's about those who will precede you, those who will come after you, those who will look to you. And in all honesty, once you begin to do the work and get real clear and real with yourself, then you're able to go out and provide the same extensive love and healing to those whom are still stuck, to those who are still hurting, to those who are still unsure or uncertain where they need relief. So uncovering for rescue. First thing is get real with yourself. The second thing is connect with community. I know that there has been a lot of talk about, the first thing we talked about was now we're in social distancing. We can't, go out of our houses and go out to social hours and hang out with our girlfriends or our guy friends and do things that we normally would do and have play dates with our kids and all of these different things. But just because we cannot do it physically does not mean that we cannot build community while we are still in social distancing. Connect with the community. Social media has made it very easy for us to connect to one another, and to stay connected to one another. It's not just important to connect, but it's also important to be active in the community in which you choose to connect with. Get connected with a group that can provide support, guidance, and resources to assist you in your healing. Get connected to communities that will provide free resources, as well as resources that may include some form of investment, whether it is a time investment or a monetary investment. You have to understand that you cannot get something for nothing. Okay? Even in your process, even in your transitioning daily through trauma, transitioning through this period in which we're in as a nation, you cannot get something for nothing. There is an investment involved in your active participation in your willingness to heal for yourself and for your family and those extended around you. And thirdly, you must seek professional help. I know that it is taboo in the Black community. It has been for many years. And I'm so grateful that the taboo has been broken and is breaking presently in reference to us getting help, reaching out for help, speaking to professionals, therapists, psychologists that can help us and navigate us through the pain of the past and bring us current. So as I was studying and doing my dissertation in school, I learned that therapy and psychology brings you from past to present, but coaching bring you present to future. So seek professional help, seek online therapy sessions, psychologists, or trauma-informed care coaching to help you move forward and get you unstuck. Now, I want to talk to you before we end about a few ways. Actually, I have a list of things that you can do to treat yourself through this process. I am not sure if we have time to go through them all, but I will talk about some things that I feel is very pertinent to where we are today. So the first thing is be gentle with your feelings and your thoughts. Okay? Be gentle with your feelings and your thoughts. Forgive yourself. Accept how you feel and mourn the losses you have encountered. A lot of times when we think about grief, and a few of the sessions that we're talking about today, I go a little bit deeper. This is just, really not as invasive as I usually go, but I wanted to give you some substance, something to hold on to, something to think about, something to process. And then hopefully you and yourself will go and do the work that's required to help you get that breakthrough that you actually need. I want you to accept how you feel and mourn the losses you have encountered. Most people think about grief and they think of only those who are no longer here, those who are, you can't physically talk to or you can't physically see. But right now, we are grieving as a nation. We're grieving the daily loss and activity of the things that we would normally do. Sit with those feelings, sit with the pain and the feelings of your past, and be present with yourself and how you feel. I actually used to say this when I have moments where I cry or where I'm sad or I may be feeling something that's very deeply distressing me, or weighty, spiritually on me. And one of the things that I have learned to do is that I have learned to sit with the pain of what I am dealing with, so much so that it becomes familiar, so that if ever it comes up again, I know what that feels like. And I can do one of two things. I can choose to remain in the pain, or I can be proactive in my healing and do something about it. The next thing is apply the same grace that you extend to others. Apply that grace and extend it to yourself. I want you to confront what is only prohibiting you presently. I'm going to stop there for a moment. Confront what is only prohibiting you presently. That may be an event, an experience, a person, a relationship, whatever that may be presently that you are dealing with. Because if you are not a professional, there is only so much that you're going to be able to do alone. This is why we said connect with the community, seek professional help. But if you have an opportunity to identify something that you're currently dealing with now, confront what is only prohibiting you presently, whatever that may be. Only you know where you are in your process. Give yourself permission to heal and move on, even if that means leaving something or someone behind. I'm going to say that again. Give yourself permission to heal and move on, even if that means leaving something or someone behind. Make no excuses. Make no excuses, no justifications, take no shortcuts and or compromises to your healing. Once you begin your process, the process that we're talking about today, getting real with ourselves, getting very clear about where we are in our process of trauma, having understanding the exposure, the compromises. Once you begin your process, you must complete it. You must do everything that you possibly can to get the healing that you so desperately deserve. Again, healing trauma is not about only you. It's not about you personally. It's about you healing the generations that will precede you. We talked about seeking professional help, but we won't go over that again. We talked about connecting with the community of supporting members. Here's some practical things you can do. Okay, practical things that you can do. Journal. Yep, I am a journaler in my healing. Some of the things that I have done personally is I have journaled, I have written, I have did dance therapy, I have did color therapy, I have spoken to individuals that understood where I was. And yes, I also sought professional healing, professional help. Journal daily, track your progress, your feelings, and your dealings consistently. Take baths and deep breaths. Participate in some physical exercise or yoga regimen. I'm gonna stop there and pause, give you a little humor. I have not always been a person that loved going to the gym. I exercised, I jumped rope, I did double dutch, I ran around, I did things to stay active. And then after I had my children, of course, my ability or my want or desire to go to the gym lessened. But I realized that health is wealth. And so I had began to build a regimen of exercise. And what that did for me, it allowed me to come from cloudiness, mental cloudiness to mental clarity. It gave me back focus. It gave me back drive. It gave me back confidence. So these are some things that you can do while you're in your process to help alleviate that mental fog and get from mental cloudiness to mental clarity. Clear your immediate space or your environment. Clear your immediate space or your environment from anything tied to the trauma or person connected to the trauma. I'm gonna say that again. I want you to take some time and clear your immediate space or environment of anything that is tied to your trauma or the person connected to your trauma. Why is that important? It's important because as you process through things, there are certain things that's going to connect. There are certain experiences, certain events, certain names, certain visuals that's going to connect that that sends a signal to the brain, and you will begin to remember the things that has happened to you or around you. That is a reminder enough. That is enough to sit with. So you don't have to have a physical reminder of something that has caused trauma. The next thing is forgive the hurt, experience, or events. So you're not just only going to forgive the person or the offense, but you're going to actually forgive the hurt. I learned a long time ago that we have, especially as, Christians or religious people, individuals, we have learned the art of saying, I forgive you, meaning I forgive you for hurting me. I forgive him for hurting me. I forgive her for hurting me. But have we really mastered the art of forgiving ourselves? Sit with that for a moment. We don't realize that we carry from year to year, event, situation to situation, relationship to relationship. We carry the baggage and the weight of unforgiveness toward ourselves. Therefore, we are not as gracious and we do not extend the mercy that we need to help us heal. Yet we say, I forgive you. Meditate on every word you can find associated with healing. Every word you can find associated with healing. There is some connection to your healing in that. Share your triggers and journey with trusted individuals. Share your triggers and your journey with trusted individuals. I'm gonna stop there for a moment. This is just a side note, but I felt the need to say this. A lot of times, even in relationships, we get in relationships and situationships with people, and before we can even get acquainted, we've already left the relationship. We've already abandoned the relationship. We've already abandoned the person. Why do we do that? We do that because something within the context of that relationship, something in the personality of that person triggered a feeling that was uncomfortable, and we never wanted to feel it again. That lets us know that there's things that we must deal with. That lets us know that there are things that are still alive and well within us that we have not taken the time to sit with and to heal. That being the case, we have allowed people that should still be in our life to exit, and we have kept people that we should have exited long time ago due to the comfortability, the familiarity, and also the rejection of wanting to deal with the pain of that trauma. So, in essence, we really do need to share our triggers with other people, with people that we can trust. Because when you share those triggers and you're honest about what those triggers are, those people are either going to love you, cover you, and nurture you while you're in it, or they're going to expose you, and in turn, they begin to expose themselves. Okay? The next thing you can do is write a letter to the person or persons or incidents as if you were confronting them, and then burn it as a physical indication of release. The next thing, be committed. This is a process. This is not an overnight. This is not overnight. It's not going to happen overnight. I'm 40 years old. There are still things that I am triggered by. There are still things that come up in me that I realize, okay, I still got some soul work to do. Okay, I still need to read a little bit more. Okay, I need to get in the face of God. Okay, I need to pray about this. I need to meditate about these things. I'm very real and very transparent about my experiences. Why? Because I understand that darkness has no place in light. Another thing, dance when you're happy, cry when you're sad. Be okay with allowing the tears to fall down your cheeks. It's okay. Pain is supposed to hurt. When you're happy, be happy. And when you're sad, be sad, but only for a moment. Don't allow sadness to consume you, because when sadness consumes you, it has the ability and the propensity to draw out very negative, powerful, and impactful outcomes that you alone won't be happy with. Trust your process. Don't rush your process. Know that you will dislike yourself before you learn to love yourself. Be prepared to meet the worst of yourself before you embrace the best of yourself. And one of the things that I have adapted during this time that we're dealing with and facing is I have made a commitment to pray over panic. At this time, I'm completely done with my presentation. I hope that there was something said. I hope that there was something that you are able to take away. If you want to reach me, I am reachable. Although my pages are not active, I do have, you can reach me directly on WhatsApp at Jabrita Shelton. You can text me directly at 240-351-2015. That is the same number you're going to get on WhatsApp. Also, I can be reached or found on Facebook at Jabrita Shelton, on Instagram at Jabrita Shelton Company or Jabrita Shelton Co. And you can also book me or check me out further. My new blog will be coming out as of tomorrow morning, actually. And my 7-day challenge will be launching in the next 2 weeks. So my website is www.jabritasheltonco.com. Again, I'm open for questions. If you have any questions, please let me know. And thank you so much for joining. And Shahab and your team, thank you so much for having me today. I truly appreciate the opportunity to connect with you and your community and for having me on today. Yes, I will post my information. Yes, I will do that. Thank you. Yes, I am open for questions and answers. I'm putting my information in, but go ahead and ask away.
Hi, this is Kashab. How you doing, Jabrita?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
Great. Why are you butchering my name?
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
No problem. So I have a question in regards to um, steps that someone who is not or not aware that they are dealing with trauma, what are the steps that you can take as a person that may feel like, well, this doesn't apply to me? What type of self-check can you do for yourself to see if you are a victim of trauma? Is that something that you covered initially? And if so, can you just go over the steps just one more time?
Sure. Yes. A few things that you can usually when I do an assessment, I usually start with a few questions. Most of the clients that I speak with or have spoken to previously or in the past have always came to me to say, I'm dealing with X, Y, and Z. So 9 times out of 10, people are very clear on where they are and where they need help. Um, but if you're not clear on where you are and where you need help, the questions that I asked before is to really think about, how are you responding or reacting day to day? Are you extremely irritable? If so, why? Are you experiencing any type of anxiety when certain conversations come up? Do you have panic attacks? If there's a certain situation that presents itself in front of you, how do you react or respond? A lot of times people don't always know that it is trauma, for one, because they want to disassociate themselves with the pain of what that trauma is. Secondly, some of the things that you can think about are you all, do you have bouts of frustration with yourself? Are you happy? Are you sad? We're not talking about being bipolar or being diagnosed with bipolarism, but we're talking about simple emotions, simple day-to-day activities. How are you feeling in those things? Where are you mentally? Are you in the room and can hear people talk, but you have already zoned out because you're in your own thoughts and in your own world? So these are also some things, how are you sleeping at night? Are you getting a good night's rest? Everything does not stem from stress alone. Some things are just unresolved issues that's toiling on the inside of us that we have not found peace with. So I would just encourage, the people or persons that if you have not identified, like I said, trauma is no respective person. We have all been affected by it in some way. But in order to get down to the nitty gritty with, yourself, you have to be real about where you are and real about the things that you are experiencing in order for you to get the help that's necessary for your healing.
Okay, thank you very much. One last question. You mentioned religious abuse. Can you give an example of religious abuse?
Yes. We have all, everybody has their particular belief. Religious abuse comes when the leader or the authority over you have used their power to manipulate you to do something that you would not normally or ordinarily do. So it is a way of manipulation using their power to impact and influence for bad and not for good. Um, and we can go deeper. I don't know how deep you want me to go into that, but was that enough, or do you want me to go deeper?
I think that's enough, at least for
Okay.
people to identify. Now, the one thing about religion and identifying it, we think that religion falls under, let's say, a denomination. My studies have shown that the banner of religion extends into politics.
Absolutely.
And so can there be, can someone be a victim of religious abuse by being the victim of political party support or politics? Can you become a victim of religious abuse? And is that something that you work with people on to kind of help them to pull themselves out? And also the same, I guess, when it comes to sports, um, politics, and then religion. Do those all fall under the same abuse banner? And should those people also seek help?
I do agree with you, and I totally understand that perspective, because religious is something, anything that we do, repetitively, and consistently. I would honestly say, now I do not deal with sports. I am not trained to deal in sports per se, and or politics as much. However, the spectrum of abuse goes across the board. Again, the spectrum of abuse goes across the board. So having, leaders in high places, influence, having a platform and using it to the detriment of those who are serving you or seated under you. Yes, that is absolutely abuse. And it goes across the board. Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Excellent job.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. If anyone else has any questions, feel free to unmute your mic and ask.
Jabrita, I have a question. This is Rafaela. You mentioned earlier about, removing yourself from things in environment that have caused the trauma before. What if people are still within that environment? And, like say, for example, people that are sometimes domestic violence, things like that. What would you say, would you recommend for them to do if they can't leave certain environments that is still causing them to be within that trauma? Like, what would you say to a person that's still, that's still within confinements where that either a spouse is abusing, or, what would you say to that? How would they seek help for that in a situation like that?
Okay, so I am actually going to speak to two parts. And I'm going to speak from an experiential perspective. I'm going to speak from the adult aspect, and I'm also going to speak to the child aspect as well. So from the adult perspective, I, have been abused. I have been in a situation where I have been physically abused, but I also have been in a situation where I grew up visually experiencing physical abuse as well. And although I understand it is not always a situation that you can immediately escape, I would encourage that you begin to put an exit strategy in place while you're still in it. Protective measures and parameters for yourself and your children, if you have children within that situation as well. What I will say also to add to that, in addition to that, is that there are, I don't know, it's so much. I'm trying to dig through so I can give you some good tips. The first thing is this, again, build those safety parameters around yourself and your child or your children. Talk to a trusted individual. Call the hotline, and I can get that information for you and added. And then begin to brainstorm an exit strategy. If it is having to leave everything, having to walk away with you and your child, it is better for you to get to a place of safety and get the healing that you need so that you don't go back. As a survivor of abuse, as a woman, oftentimes when you have been abused, you either become the abuser or you continue to accept abuse. You have to get to a point where you can love yourself above the abuse that you're currently in. And I know that it sounds impossible and it seems far off, but it is possible. I want to also speak to a child that may be experiencing, the abuse of its mother or father or whomever that legal guardian is over them, and the effects of what that does psychologically. Go to a trusted friend. call the police, report anonymously. You don't have to leave your name. You don't have to leave your personal information. You can go to a neighbor's house, call and report, and stay safe until someone is there to help recover, your parent as well. As far as abuse is concerned, abuse does not have to be male or female. It can be both. Okay. Abuse is not only physical, it can be verbal, it can be emotional, withholding things, withholding love, withholding, nurturing and care. It could be withholding food. It can be many, many things. But if you are in that situation, I would encourage you to get to a place where you can really start thinking about an exit strategy and put some places and parameters. If you have to get a restraining order, even while you're still there in it. If you have to send your children away and talk to the person that you send them to let them know, I am planning my escape. However, right now I need you to keep my children safe. Whatever that may be, get to a source, a trusted source that can help you identify a plan of escape.
Thank you. That was great.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Any other questions, anyone? If anybody has any other question, if you can unmute yourself. Well, no question. Jabrita, thank you so much. That was fantastic. We really do appreciate all the information you gave us today. It was amazing. I'll also put it on a chat, some of the things that you suggested to do. So if everybody wants to scroll down the chat and copy that, I think that would be great. If anybody have any other question for Jabrita, I think you did put your information on there. Jabrita, do you also want to put your email on the chat so people can get in touch with you?
Okay.
Website, but we are going to also be replaying this on Facebook later. So if you missed anything, if you came in late, it will be available for replay a little later. Jabrita, thank you so much. Anything you want to say to end it?
No, I just want to say thank you again. I just hope that there was something that was said that, someone can take away and really begin the work that is necessary. We have to take the time to heal, because if we don't, we're going to continue to, allow everything else to seep in and do the job that we are mandated to do. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks everyone who attended. Thank you, Jabrita, once again. That was amazing. All right, you guys have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Thank you. You also. Thank you so much.